Today I'm going to be talking about one of my most favorite recent games, Shadow of Mordor. I was doing research for this video, and I disagree with most reviews out there on how this game is portrayed and different things that go on in the story. So without further ado, let's get started.
The game starts with Talion staring down at his dead son and wife as the game flashes back to events that have happened. Talion learns his wife and son have been slaughtered, and he has been murdered in a blood sacrifice. Not only that, but he has been cursed to live in between life and death by being chained and animated by a vengeful wraith named Celebrimbor. Talion and Celebrimbor then proceed to slaughter hundreds of orcs and tens of captains and chieftains, all in an effort to slay Talion's murderer, the Black Hand of Sauron. On the surface, Shadow of Mordor is a brilliantly designed hack-and-slash Middle-earth game, having innovation in the area of AI through the Nemesis system. Below the surface, however, is a story infused with lore that is taken from J.R.R. Tolkien's work and some of the game's own lore, causing the game's story to be drenched in symbolism. Before we look at Shadow of Mordor, we have to understand its source material. Many commentators on Tolkien's works have tried to rule out any religious theme out of Tolkien's books, saying that Tolkien was merely trying to create mythology for Europe as well as illustrate Europe during and immediately after World War II. Commentators note that there are no direct references to any religion at all in Tolkien's works, so we shouldn't read into what's not there. However, Tolkien himself disarms this idea by saying, "The Lord of the Rings is of course a fundamentally religious and Catholic work, unconsciously so at first, but consciously in the revision. That is why I have not put in or have cut out practically all references to anything like religion, to cultural practices in the imaginary world, for the religious element is absorbed into the story and the symbolism." Now, to lay a foundation for the game, we can start out with the game's title, Shadow of Mordor. Even in the beginning cutscene, it drills into a shadow and darkness by saying, "In the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie." The game is set in, well, Mordor. The land is dark and is infested with orcs. If we follow the lore, orcs are fallen elves. They are East Elves that were distorted and corrupted by Melkor, who we'll talk about later. With their strength and wisdom greatly exceeding that of men, the elves were symbols of celestial beings in books that were exploring ideas of spiritual warfare. Being that orcs are fallen elves, we can conclude that orcs are symbols of fallen angels, aka demons. Men are weak, and that is why they are slayed by the orcs in the game due to the orcs' superior strength. Keeping Tolkien's quote in mind, elves and orcs are representatives of good and evil in a spiritual battle. Now, before I continue, do I think the man, Christian Cantamesa, who is part of the team that created one of the most violent games in history, Manhunt, is pushing for the Christian worldview? No. But it wouldn't be a stretch for him to use symbols and lore Tolkien did to illustrate and deepen the story he was trying to portray. Cantamesa's previous game, Red Dead Redemption, was about John Marston trying to redeem himself through his own power, but failed to do so. Shadow of Mordor has the same theme of vengeance and redemption that Red Dead Redemption did, but with a different outcome. Upon each death, you are returned to these silver towers known as Forge Towers in the game. The first time you die and are reborn on the towers, there's a dialogue between Talion and Celebrimbor. Talion asked what these towers of silver are. Celebrimbor answers by saying, "They are lights to guide us in the land of shadow where all other lights may fail." If you remember the Lord of the Rings books or movies, you should recall the scene where Galadriel gives Frodo the vial of Galadriel. This vial holds a shard of the Star of Arendelle. Arendelle is also symbolic of a Christ figure in the Middle-earth lore, with this quote from Siren Wolf inspiring Tolkien to write the character, "Hail Arendelle, brightest of angels, over Middle-earth to men sent." The next sentence in dialogue is also heavily filled with lore and in turn symbolism. Pale reflections of the light of the two trees and memories of a lost kingdom. Celebrimbor is referring to the two trees of Valinor in Middle-earth lore. The two trees were Telperion and Lorelin. Telperion was silver while Lorelin was gold, and together the two trees were a symbol of an alliance between the Dunedain, or men, and the elves. The trees were destroyed by Melkor. Melkor was the greatest of the Anor, or divine spirits. He fell from glory when he disrupted the music of Anor and defiled the will of Irul Ilúvatar, or the One, described as the single omniscient and omnipotent creator. Morgoth corrupted many of the Anor to his allegiance, fought the Valar, and corrupted Arda. In the biblical narration, men dwelled in harmony with celestial beings, God and the angels, in the Garden of Eden, But the harmony was destroyed when Lucifer, the highest-ranking angel of God, rebelled against God with a third of the angels in an attempt to overthrow him. When Lucifer fell, he was known as Satan, and he was the one who tempted Adam and Eve to sin, causing them to sin and break the harmony or alliance between men and the Celestials. Talion comes into the fray, freeing slaves left and right from orcs, giving hope to a once hopeless world of men in Mordor. Now, I may be the only one because of my background, but does anybody else see elements of Jesus Christ's death in Talion's? Before you start throwing comments at me like Rotten Tomatoes, let me explain why I interpret Talion this way. In the beginning of the story, Talion is captured by the Tower of Sauron, the Hammer of Sauron, and the Black Hand of Sauron. In the capture, Talion is beaten down by the Hammer of Sauron, and Talion's hand is smashed. And because the hammer's mace has spikes, if it goes through Talion's hand, it looks very similar to the way Christ's hands are depicted to be nailed to a cross. The Tower of Sauron has to stop the hammer from killing Talion so the hand can perform a sacrifice. In ancient times, the Romans were known for having their ways of killing and torture, and could have easily have killed Christ, and probably almost did during the beatings and floggings. Likewise, in the game's lore, the Hammer of Sauron is known as giving men that wanted glorious death they want. Then the Black Hand of Sauron sacrifices Talion in a blood sacrifice in an attempt to summon Celebrimbor to basically allow Sauron's full power, raise an army of the dead, and conquer Middle-earth. However, it is this very act that allows Celebrimbor to be removed from the halls of waiting and enter Talion, allowing Celebrimbor to resurrect Talion and kill the Black Hand. Likewise, Satan was trying to wipe out Christ because it was Christ that was supposed to redeem people, although Satan didn't know how. Yet because he was not omniscient, Satan causes the very thing that causes his downfall. In the Bible, it is Christ's death and resurrection that allows people to have their sins redeemed and go to heaven. In the game, it is Talion's resurrected body that defeats the Black Hand of Sauron and Sauron himself. In the biblical narrative, it is Christ that revives this fallen world and gives redemption to people. In Shadow of Mordor, it is Talion that is freeing slaves, which is in fact a very big part of the game. Several main story missions are dedicated to freeing slaves and helping the resistance, as well as several side missions that involve you cutting slaves from posts and freeing them. Not only is freeing slaves a big part of the story, it is implemented into the gameplay itself. When you kill an orc, the game recognizes if it's a kill, a ranged kill, or a stealth kill. On top of that, the game recognizes if you free slaves from their orc captors, and you are awarded experience points for doing so. It is Talion that allows Celebrimbor to get vengeance on Sauron and in turn redeem himself. Celebrimbor is seeking both revenge for the death of his family and redemption in giving Sauron the Rings of Power and the One Ring. In the game, Celebrimbor forged the Rings of Power, and it is suggested he helped forge the One Ring Sauron wore. Celebrimbor is vengeful because of Sauron's execution of his family and tricking him into forging the Rings of Power. Talion is the one who allows Celebrimbor to redeem himself. Talion's name has its roots in Latin with the term lex talionis, meaning talion. Talion laws were laws that followed an eye for an eye principle. So Sauron tricks and kills Celebrimbor. So Celebrimbor tricks and kills Sauron through Talion. Remember, it is Celebrimbor who chose Talion. One more interesting thing to note is Celebrimbor's name means Sands of Silver. Obviously, the towers are silver, Celebrimbor's name means Sands of Silver, and Celebrimbor strikes an anvil on top of the tower that allows you to fast travel to that tower later. It is also these towers of silver that Celebrimbor constantly revives Talion to. It is no coincidence that throughout the Bible, silver is a symbol of redemption. Silver was used to buy slaves out of slavery or redeem slaves. Remind you of anything? Silver was used to pay for sacrifices of trespass sins, or sins committed in ignorance. Remind you of anything? Once again, I don't think Christian is trying to push the Christian worldview, although the name is a little bit ironic. But even if the teams of Monolith and Ubisoft didn't intend these connections, it's amazing to see them connect and highlight the themes of redemption in the game.
If you disagreed with what I said, post in the comments below. If you do agree with what I said, post in the comments below. Basically, all things that are good and social, do. Now, there's so much more that goes on with the game, so I'm thinking about doing another video on Shadow of Mordor. Do you guys think I should? Until next time, peace.
Hey boy, nurse, I'ma get 'em all.